We started a nonprofit corporation, and when I say we, that's who we are in this class here. We are Substance Abuse Coalition Summit. We are neutral. We are not for profit. We have no agenda except our community and what we do for a living. We know that 5% of the world's population live in America. 25% of the people who are imprisoned in the world live in America. Okay? That's a lot of cases come before us in criminal justice related to substance abuse and alcohol. Alcohol is substance abuse. You think of opioids and you think of pain meds and all that. But we don't, I'm convinced we don't talk about alcohol because everybody just assumes you can't do anything about that. Nobody's going to do anything about that. So our nonprofit corporation, the neutral, not-for-profit corporation, actually started years ago. Dante Ludovisi from Video Standard here is a member of the Cinematographers Guild, which is very prestigious. He's done professional movies. We've been hanging out together doing this message for a long time. And so we decided to be nonprofit, which is less threatening, and we are neutral. Well, what happened was we started talking about substance abuse, and the first most important contribution we had is I want to make sure that you guys get how some of my back credentials start to work in this. Once upon a time, I started doing substance abuse treatment collaboration with defense, criminal defense. Rule 570, we talked about that, okay? And we're going to talk more in detail about that in a minute. So, back to collaboration, one of the first cases I had a young man who was arrested for possession with intent to deliver. Do I have any criminal lawyers out here still? I know a couple of you left. And with intent to deliver is the felony, right? That takes it up a major notch. Okay. So I had a with intent to deliver. I went to a magistrate. I did a very cool job. We just talked about pricing last time we were here. I had an entry of appearance, prepare for a preliminary hearing, go to the preliminary hearing, document the file, and get it ready to go through the formal arraignment and enter a plea. $3,500. Okay? That's a good deal. And it was a good deal for the client too, because I did something very good. I got the kid out from under a felony. Okay? Well, the weird thing happened is he was arrested 2 more times before I could ever plead him on the first one. And so I'm preparing this speech for the parents. I mean, hey, that's several car payments, right? If you want to think that way, but that's not good business. That's not who we are. So I had the parents in, I was going to give them the big speech on how your son or daughter might be a criminal, a recalcitrant person who just keeps on doing things like this. He might be a criminal, and maybe you should hire a public defender or something where they're free and you don't have to pay for criminal defense. Anyway, so what happened was we involved a doctor in all of that, and I'm going to go back to that later. For now, I want to go back to the idea that led me onto a very effective treatment and criminal defense strategy working with our brothers in the medical profession there. And before I go there, though, I took that from my prosecutor days, connected to my defense days, but then it started to work. It really worked well, and I started doing these CLE classes and teaching people what we were doing. And it seemed like it was very well received, and a funny thing happened. It got better, and it got more effective, and it was more important. Remember, in the last class, we talked about the stages of incompetence. You don't even know what you don't know, okay? So much good information now is hidden in plain sight. So then we started thinking about, we should probably talk more about this. So I said, you know what? If I can get in front of more people, the schoolhouse would be a good place to do that. I'm used to the schoolhouse. I know what the schoolhouse can do. By the way, they have a lot more fancy equipment than I can afford. They have an auditorium. They're a brick and mortar facility that's community accessible and well known. And I said, and you know what? That's back where I started. All my careers, my first one was in education. Because, ladies and gentlemen, as a community leader, and you're a parent, some of you are a grandparent, some of you are a brother, some of you are a sister, you can't walk away from what you know. When you leave here today, you're going to know things that are obligating you. I many times struggle with whether I should show this movie at all. And you know what I always come back to? I say on one hand, somebody's going to say, that was really what I didn't want out of a CLE class, or every one of us know that graduation story. That story is going to play itself out, unfortunately, several times in the next couple months. And God forbid it would be anybody you know. And it's very important, and I thought, number one, I would definitely show this to clients. Well, before I even got there, I went back to the schoolhouse and we started doing presentations. If you ever want to remember a thought, the most effective, cheapest substance abuse treatment plan there is prevention, okay? So if you want to prevent somebody from doing something, you need to take it into the schoolhouse, okay? So the nonprofit corporation, what's in the name? Substance abuse, not just opiates, not just benzodiazepines, not just cocaine, marijuana. Guess what? That's the big wave that's coming at us, okay? I can tell you, you're going to learn someday that I said it, that there's going to be a huge bulge in cases coming at us. I'm not telling you, I know some of you are saying, darn it, should have been legalized a long time ago. That's not what today's class is about. Anyway, substance abuse, and what our coalition calls substance abuse is anything that deprives a person from their voluntary, intelligent choice-making process. That to me is substance abuse. So this letter here is very important. It's called coalition. Dr. Jim Edmonds there, Dr. Joe DiFrancesco, okay, Dante Ludovisi, a cinematographer, Angelo Pepa, attorney at law, and the credentials go on and on and on. But, bless you, one of the things we like to say that, going back to my other roots when I used to coach, collaboration with a coalition of people. They're professionals, I'm professionals, you're professionals. If you worked with another client attorney on a file, no professional is ever supposed to surrender his or her best judgments in relation to somebody else because you have an arrangement or something like that. So collaboration requires professionals who are disciplined enough to say that my professional judgment comes first. But however, there are some common themes that if we worked together, it could produce some startling results, and we're going to talk to you about that in a minute. So the coalition letter there is so important, and we're so proud of the coalition of the like-minded professionals that we have been able to recruit. Now, coalition and collaboration sometimes sounds more attractive, and it sounds good, and it might be easier to say than to do. First of all, 2 heads are better than 1. The math is unassailable. 12 heads are better than 2, okay? But try putting 12 professional heads in one project and get anything done, okay? Especially when sometimes you have egos bigger than the building we're in, okay? And that's just part of who we are. That's why we are. That's what we do. That's part of the passion we come with. So collaboration can only work when the professionals have agreed to play together. This is not a situation where doctors are being sued by lawyers or lawyers being sued by doctors or anybody suing anybody. It's people finding something that they can work together on. And they respect each other's competence and turf. And it's very important. Technology now has given us so many ways that we can collaborate. You can send a file to another attorney electronically. There's so many things we can do. So my best attempt to explain to you what collaboration is about, that is effective collaboration, not chaos, is to ask each one of you, if this was a group of musicians in here. Anybody ever hear of Joshua Bell? Nobody? Okay. I always get that. I never knew, though, so don't be upset. I didn't know who he was either. He's a very famous concert violinist. Okay. From what I understand, he has a Stradivarius violin that it's so expensive, and he takes it to the bathroom with him, from what I understand. And Joshua Bell, once upon a time, just to give you a little sidelight here, Joshua Bell, once upon a time, was, I think he was 11 years old. He played in the Philadelphia Philharmonic, and he was a very good, I don't know how anybody would want to go see a concert solo violinist, but I guess he's that good. And if you figured out the Holiday Bowl and the seats, he's worth $12,000 an hour or something like that. But as an experiment, a social experiment, you can Google that, by the way, Joshua Bell, and it'll come up, the little video. He played in the Washington, D.C. subway area, and people gave him $7 in an hour and a half in a hat. They thought he was homeless. Okay? Out of context, sometimes some things isn't recognized. But anyway, let's go back to my more important thing. Each one of you are concert violinists of the caliber of Joshua Bell, and you get on a stage. If you took your own sheet music and started playing whatever you want, whenever you want, however loud you wanted, you would have total chaos and noise. We know that. Now, what makes it different is when somebody passes out sheet music that we all use, and somebody controls the cadence of the music and when you play and how loud you play. Now you have choreographed music. So what I'm saying is I'm very proud of our nonprofit corporation in the administration, communication, professional infrastructures that technology allow them to play together. They literally become wall-less firms here. Does anybody in here work for a big law firm? You don't need to raise your hand. If you know, you know what that means. That means every Friday, every 2 weeks or whatever it is, there's a pay period, and those people have to be paid. Well, with a coalition, then quite frankly, you can't possibly afford to hire and impanel a group of experts like that team could be. Our team, basically, I submit to you respectfully, is a dream team in professional competencies and what we're about to talk about. And when you can put them all in one place or all working through technology, through one direction for a common goal without yielding their independent professional advice that we talked about, then you have beautiful choreographed music. That's the coalition. And the last letter here is summits. Summits means that it's the highest, most aggressive, gifted group of people we could find. Because we're not profit and because we're neutral, we always need to remain neutral. We have no agenda. We are not interested in getting paid from anybody, okay? We have no agenda except getting the best that we can for our patients and clients. So what does that? That ensures our tomorrow, because we know that if something better comes along, we're going to use it. Our goal is to always remain neutral. But the reason why the summit is important, we recognize that there are people out here who don't know any of what we're about to tell you. So we know that we need to proliferate this information. So we chose to go back to the public school, the private school, the college, and have all these people brought in, and then we are now explaining to them what's very often what they've never heard of before. Okay? And so the summit is always committed, first and foremost, to beginning and maintaining an ongoing, neutral, not-for-profit, most learned debate in this area. 8.5% of the United States population over age 12. In 2013, it was indicated have a substance abuse problem. That's more than lung, breast, and prostate cancer combined. The same year, the study said it's probably more like 40 million Americans, not 20 million. You know, we see it in the courtroom all the time. We now have diversionary courts and whatnot, and we'll go into that later after we cover this medical part of what we do. So the goal was to go to any school we could and put one of these summits on. And the summit is basically in the morning, okay, we have a trial. In the lunchtime, we have all of the elected officials invited from all the areas. And we process them in, and we have a moment of silence for first responders and people who have lost their lives in some of these issues. It's a very emotional but very short, and then we have a little luncheon in the cafeteria where we all talk to each other and say, I'm going to keep in touch with you. And we start this learned debate, and we get it ongoing, because these things here now allow us to stay in touch with each other. This allows us to tweet out information. And this allows us to actually have now an ongoing debate without having to come back to the schoolhouse every year or something like that. This is amazing. The power of this social media stuff is very, very amazing. It's also very destructive. We talked about that last time. But it's a good way for us to start a movement. Okay? Now, having said that, we have a gifted speaker in the afternoon, and then on Saturday when the schoolhouse is closed, or the college, in some classrooms there'll be Act 48 teachers. Is that Act 48, sir? I know you're in education. Is that Act 48, public education? Act 48? Act 48. Ongoing instruction. Yeah, thank you. Act 48. hours that they have to take like you take your CLEs, although they're not required yearly. Secondly, there'll be a classroom where there are CMEs, right, doctors? Is that what it is, CMEs? And another classroom will have CLEs like this. So now we are beginning to create a learned debate and give people their credits. Other classrooms are just for lay people to know how to deal with issues like codependency. What do you do when you have somebody that's the uncle, the aunt, the mom, the dad, the son, or the daughter? You know, we have all these kind of things working, and we're going to be taking that to the college level. So all of that is in those little letters there. Substance Abuse Coalition Summits, neutral, not-for-profit, 5013C, Inc. Now, we started, I used to be an assistant principal, and I know your educational background, and I sense a reluctance sometimes for them to invite people into their schools because they're afraid the kids might act up and look bad, right?
No, I'll be calling you.
Oh, you're going to be calling me. Okay, thank you. Okay, but there are lots of assistant principals out there that say, holy hell, I don't want anybody in that classroom. The kids are liable to make a fool out of me or something. Trust me, I've heard that. I've never heard it directly, but I sense that. Now, back when I used to teach school and I was an assistant principal, I'm dating myself again, I'm so old Abraham Lincoln takes off on my birthday. When I was an assistant principal, I could go into a cafeteria and do that, and in seconds there would be silence. They used to call me Buford Pusser. Do you remember who he was? Walking tall. They allowed paddling back then and all that stuff. So I was a character. But I controlled the kids and I loved them too. But listen, they knew when they saw me that to not be crossing the line. But I also made sure, especially the kids who got in trouble, I found ways to find them doing something good that I could put my arm around them too. You can't just punish or you can't just reprimand. You must love equally. But sometimes it's really hard. I had a football team once that was so bad that I started clapping when they broke the huddle correctly because they couldn't do anything else. Okay? But anyway, so you do have to encourage it. Anyway, that's a sidelight. Let's go back to the public school presentation. So when we have the public school presentation, we compete with a lot different. I'm not so hard on these professional educators. When Buford Pusser walked the halls in Newcastle High School, Buford Pusser, they didn't have iPhones that can bring up movies and games whenever they want and text and all that. It's different now. So we recognize, and Dante Ludovisi here, I keep on patting him on the back because he should be patted on the back. He has created engaging messages. It's one thing to show the kids something. It's another thing to engage the kids. So this is where your lawyer thing comes back in. I'm going to go back into your lawyer brain now. Anybody who watched that movie, how many people almost felt like crying? I see it all the time, and I still get a tear in my eye. Because that girl is so good. That camera, let me tell you a little bit about the movie, and this is good that we're putting this in the can, Dante. That movie has a whole history of all of its own. We had a guy who did one of our first presentations in Kennedy Catholic High School, Mike Stribe. Remember, anybody here from Duquesne University remember Mike Stribe? He was a torts instructor, okay? And his wife is a judge in common pleas court in Butler. Yeah, she was a magistrate. She's now a common pleas judge. Well, Mike called me after he did the summits thing with us, and he said, Angelo, you got to track down this movie Graduation Day. Did you ever see this movie Graduation Day? Well, long story longer, sorry. We tracked it down. Apparently, this is the unofficial, what I know about Graduation Day. It really happened. The movie was really made. The camera flew through the windshield and kept on playing. Did you see the little kids at the end where it says dedicated to Troy and Elena Pack? Well, Bob Pack is their father. Now, I know him, and he's a member of our advisory board, although we don't stay in touch as often as we should, and I want to track him down. But Bob Pack, his wife was pregnant with twins at the time and walking through somewhere in Silicon Valley, I believe, with their kids on a very nice summer day, holding Troy and Elena in their hands with and some lady who had been to a dentist, I think it was, and she got some kind of a pain reliever, and I guess she was at a graduation party and drank within minutes of the same time, aside from the recommendations of her doctor and whatnot. Apparently, the story goes that she lost consciousness or whatever, swerved over, killed everybody except the wife. All 4 kids were gone. So it's some kind of huge settlement, maybe dram shop. You know, again, let's not get into the boring parts of the law, but I know you're lawyers. You're thinking of that. the homeowner, the person who had the party, all those liability issues. Anyway, it became a huge settlement. But he used the settlement money to create this movie, Graduation Day. And to this day, I think he's still out there. He's a reformist in DUI law out in California. And Bob has given us license to use that. And we keep on debating. And I've gone into high school sometimes before Christmas. Alexander Lindsay came with me. And we always worry about, we tell people, this is, you might have lost somebody in a car accident. You might want to be excused from the movie or whatever. And the little man on the shoulder is saying basically, should we show this? Should we bum everybody out at Christmas? And you know how I resolved that? I resolved that in if somehow I kept somebody from being in a car crash like that, I think I'm going to take the chance that maybe I bummed them out for 10 minutes. Somebody's going to unbum them out probably later. So I think it was very important. One of the telling parts of one of our YouTube videos, by the way, is Mr. Lindsay, a trial attorney. Some of you know him. He talks about the time he went to a funeral in Butler County. Two identical twin cheerleaders, blonde cheerleaders. One had a linebacker boyfriend and the other one blah, 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 blah. Well, the girl who had the linebacker boyfriend went to a Christmas party. It was the first time she had ever drunk before. I mean, do you guys know why we have fruit juice in drinks, where that started? During Prohibition, when made-up fabricated alcohol tasted so bad they had to dress it up. That's literally when we started doing mixed drinks. Anyway, the girl never drank before, so it has to be very fruity, and she's drinking fruity drinks, and her linebacker boyfriend's matching them one at a time for beer. She consumes probably 7 times the alcohol he did, goes into the cloakroom, falls asleep. She's what, 0.4? She dies of an overdose. There's a huge number of kids that run the risk of dying of alcohol overdose. Okay, so that message we get out, and then we showed the message on the crash scene. So this is where you get back to the lawyer part. What do we know about lawyers? We still know that lawyer shows are popular. So what we do is we'll go into the school early in the fall, and we will have a preliminary hearing. Okay, my trial lawyers out there. And in our case, the preliminary hearing, the driver survived. He's crippled from the waist down. He's wheeled in. We present the preliminary hearing. It's going to be bound over. Do we have any doubt of that? Right? And it's going to be bound over on what? DUI. What else? Criminal lawyers. Homicide by vehicle, DUI related, right? That's a big one. That's 3 years. And that's even if you're an 18-year-old kid. Right, counselor? That's a big one. Now, if you watch this show like a lawyer, aside from the tears and whatnot, Jake is driving the car. Jake is competently driving the car. So the question is, he's definitely DUI while he's driving the car and the crash happens. The question is he DUI such that the causal connection goes to the alcohol where it's homicide by vehicle DUI related? We've tried that case in front of adult and student juries, and I'll bet it comes up different every time. Whether or not beyond a reasonable doubt, because just before the impact, she says to Jake something, she's holding the camera and she gets his attention, so he says something, and all at once those, how fast was the guy going that hit them? Did he stop? Was the right light yellow and whatnot? So it's such an exciting possibility on how it can come out. The kids really get into it in the preliminary hearing. The preliminary hearing is bound over for trial. Bond is set beyond the kid's parents' ability. You can hear a pin drop when that kid in the wheelchair is cuffed and wheeled out by a sheriff's deputy who volunteered to show up for the preliminary hearing. That's all part of what we do. The preliminary hearing then goes several months, and the kids wheeled back in June, or April, right about the time of the graduation, and we have the trial. And the kids are all thinking about that right now. And we remind them that because the parents couldn't make bond, this kid's been in prison since then. Okay? Whether he's guilty or not. And then, of course, we try the case. The judge goes and we have a judge that'll go there and spend time with the gifted kids. We'll pass out jury instructions. Alexander Lindsay, who's an experienced criminal trial attorney, created the fact pattern, including the testimony by Corporal Ogden, who investigated the case and all that. And it's really very trial worthy. It's a close call that we actually have a trial for the adults in the evening sometimes if they want to come and see it. It's really funny. I mean, again, when the kids come in and they leave and hear da 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 da, remember Perry Mason? Do 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 do. Well, guess what? None of the kids have a clue what that is. That's how old I am. The Perry Mason theme song might work for the adults, but anyway, that's the whole program to get the kids engaged in prevention. Okay. Now, a funny thing happened while we were presenting that. We always recognized that there are all kinds of substance abuse treatment out there. Does anybody know what methadone is? Okay. Methadone is a narcotic. Do you know that? Methadone is a very aggressive narcotic. Legal pain medication. Does anybody know what Vicodin is? Okay. Do we know what OxyContin is? By the way, I used to call it Oxycontin. It's OxyContin. It was believed to be a revolutionary drug. It's a narcotic that is continually released, right, docs? And the continuance is where the continin comes from. And it's a legal medication out there. It's obviously legal, but it's obviously very narcotic and very addicting. Suboxone, buprenorphine. It is an opiate that is ingested, docs, by the mouth, if done properly, and it's metabolized slowly so you don't get high, but you blunt the cravings. Okay? So we started researching and preaching these two letters here. If you researched treatment, what was happening was we were preaching a methodology, and lots of people were coming up to us and saying, geez, my uncle, my cousin, my dad, they have a problem. Where would they get this kind of treatment? We didn't know. Well, we're doctors and lawyers and we're presenting for information purposes. But we had a group of visionary doctors decide to actually start creating these treatment centers. So we said, what are we going to call them? So we decided to call them verifiable recovery network, meaning there's as many of them as we can, as fast and far as we can cover across the country. So SACS became a licensor to people who wanted to have a verifiable recovery network facility that dealt in total abstinence, no narcotic treatment. Now, if you Google treatment and use those words total abstinence, I believe you probably wouldn't find anybody. I'm not so sure that VRN is even known yet. But it's very important, I think, to separate total abstinence from other treatment strategies, but medicine-assisted treatment is also part of that. Now, at this point in time, I think would be a good time if, gentlemen, if you could come on up and we'll share the microphone here and we'll get into the medical side of what we're going to do, and then I'll get through the boring legal stuff when we're done. Is that okay? Okay, Dr. Jim Edmonds and Dr. Joe... What? I know his name. I forgot to say it, huh? DeFrancesco. I froze. I froze because you looked at me. I thought I was no longer on. Testing. So we'll have to share this, right? Let me shut this blinding light off here.
We can do that. Thank you.
You know what? I think they have a thing here where you can just shut the window, right? But that'll get hot, huh? Wouldn't want to do that. Oh. Hey, Bruce, can I borrow you to... I think you... Okay, so right in here, yes. And we have to share this little microphone. And so I'm going to have a...
Sure, and as they speak...
You'll tell us if it's too...
Put it on their lapel as they speak.
Okay, as they go.
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, I'm going to have them introduce themselves again.
I'm Joe DeFrancesco.
And doctor, you're a doctor.
I'm an oral maxillofacial surgeon.
Okay, so that's certainly a doctor. You cut people open and sew them up.
For 35 years now.
Okay. Where is your office located anyway?
I have one in Bellevue, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and one in Slippery Rock.
Okay, and...
I'm Jim Edmonds. I'm also an oral and maxillofacial surgeon, and I have two offices, one in Pittsburgh and Fox Chapel, and one in Elwood City.
Okay, doctor, and you know who I am. Dante, are we in the camera range okay? And the sound is okay? Now, doctors, you're part of the Verifiable Recovery Network, right? Can you tell them what that is?
Verifiable Recovery Network is a different treatment modality for substance abuse. And that involves a trilogy of sequences. The first is with an electrostimulant called the bridge.
I won't walk away and judge him with you.
Is that good?
Yes, and once you set that on the table.
We'll there we go.
The second part of that is the medically assisted aspect, and we can go through that a little bit better using Vivitrol or naltrexone.
Doctor, only want to interrupt you 1 second. This is the card that you have in front of you. Okay? Now, can I help set the stage for a second here? I'm trying to figure out how I want to go there. I explained to them methadone, Suboxone, buprenorphine, and there's something else. Everybody hear of antabuse? Okay, antabuse is that thing where you take it, and if you're an alcoholic and you drink, your body thinks it's been poisoned by formaldehyde, and you go into dry heaves. Now, I only want to give the historical perspective to kick off back to Jim again. Although there are references to alcoholism and substance abuse clear back in the book of Proverbs in the Bible, that's how long this has been with us, been a big problem. Not until 1959 or so did we first get into medicinal interventions. Antabuse was kind of the first one, then methadone, then buprenorphine and Suboxone. The latest one out, remember we talked about total abstinence, is a substance called naltrexone. Naltrexone comes in a variety of formats. Not a medical word, you're probably going to scold me for that, but one, it can be a tablet, and it's for a 24-hour cycle. The doctor will tell you what that does. Secondly, it can be an injection, which for 30 days will exist. And third, you can actually have an implant under your skin. That is not narcotic, and it is absolutely important for you to get that. It's non-narcotic. The pill, the implant, the injection. Non-narcotic. Not a controlled Schedule II substance like the first two were. Okay? Two caveats. You can't take that non-narcotic blockade unless you have been clean for enough days to metabolize out of your system the opiates. Now I'm going to go back to where we were. Okay? So I'm not so sure you knew I didn't cover that with them.
Right.
We're at the third.
Well, the Vivitrol, as he was mentioning, is a non-narcotic, and it does give the patient that's recovering 30 days where he does not or she does not have the symptoms. But prior to the Vivitrol injection is a medical device called the bridge. And it's a percutaneous stimulator implanted right behind the ear with surface leads that have input to certain cranial nerves, the 5th, 7th, and 9th, and 10th cranial nerves. And what this does basically is block the receptors in the brain from allowing any opioid to get through to the brain. So basically, over a 5-day period, they can get through the withdrawal period with basically not having withdrawal. So in the first 10 minutes, maybe they're 15%. By the time 15 or 20 minutes are gone by, 90% of the withdrawal symptoms are gone.
And Doc, we call those withdrawal symptoms a COW score. Can you tell them what a COW score is?
Right, and the COW score is the higher the score, the worse the symptoms are. And people could have symptoms from shaking, vomiting, shivering, and many other things, intense pain. This takes that away, essentially, to allow them then to go back to work, to not sit in a facility for a week or 2 weeks or however long that would take with many of the other treatments. And then that gets them to the point where the Vivitrol injection is effective for the next period.
Before that, they are metabolizing the opiates out of their system. The molecule, they taught me this stuff, by the way. The molecule, the morphine molecule is not like anything else you've ever had in your body. Okay, you could take 100 vitamins today and you will excrete them and not get any benefit from those vitamins. But a morphine molecule seems to never want to leave. It's a violent little mean SOB, and it punishes you with these withdrawal symptoms for not feeding it. And it's the big deal. You know, we have the medicine that can blockade you, but you can't take that unless you eliminate, unless you go through this withdrawal. During the time your body is metabolizing, am I okay with that?
Right.
These opiates out of your system, not like a vitamin, it's going to take about 5 days or so, depending on metabolism, and that could vary. But during that time, they are metabolizing out the morphine molecule, and then they are ready for this other thing, and I'm going to give that back to you, and you guys can tell us what that Vivitrol does.
I'm going to give this to you, but basically the Vivitrol then gets them through the next 30 days. But in addition to all of these things, which is really just as important as any of them, is the counseling that occurs before, during, and after all the treatments. And that's part of that trilogy.
Well, I think most of you may or may not understand what addiction is all about. What addiction is the craving of the body to give it something to make it feel better. What makes it feel better? Dopamine. Within our bodies, we have natural endorphins. What does that mean? That means through various, and primarily the autonomic nervous system, and I'm sure all of us have had that scare tactic where the autonomic nervous system takes us to another level, where our heart rate goes up, where it's either the fight or flight. You either run away or begin to defend yourself. But the chemical that provides us the high is the dopamine, and the dopamine is released when our natural endorphins, the epinephrine that we have within our system that increases our heart rate, makes us do what we want. When you become an addict, part of what happens is every time you take a narcotic or you take alcohol, the next time you need more, because the body reaches a different and higher threshold that it demands more. I don't know if any of you have seen a withdrawal from a patient, but it's not a pleasant sight to see. And that person, whether it be he or she, all they want is to be happy again. And the only way they can get happy again is to raise the threshold that they had before, because the body has more receptors that it's developed, and therefore it needs more. And that's where the vicious cycle comes into play.
And doctor, we know that, I can talk loud enough, we know that the more they take, the more it requires to get to that level. But we also know, do we not, that they almost never get back to that level. So basically they're taking drugs to avoid the withdrawal, and they're not even getting happy anymore.
And that's exactly right. And again, narcotics have been around for so long. Jim and I in the medical field, we went through the times where in the 70s and 80s, when we were on hospital staff, part of what the Joint Commission on Hospital Accreditation was doing at that point, they added a fifth vital sign other than temperature, blood pressure and what have you, and that was pain. And from our perspective, part of what we needed to do when we saw a patient post-op is, what's your pain on a scale 1 to 10? Well, to Jim and I, that was not scientific, but we were required to ask our patients, and they were to give us a subjective evaluation of their pain, and based upon that, we would prescribe the narcotic. Obviously, after a period of time, they realized the error of their ways, and at this point, that's no longer true, but we felt...
Okay, but have we arrived at a point where it's no longer true and people are seeing the error of their ways? Isn't that one of the reasons we're standing here?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
Okay, so let's give them a little teeny history. How many people have ever read the book Dreamland? Please write that down. It's a very small paperback book. It's amazing. Dreamland is the name of the book. Dreamland is something these two gentlemen have become an expert on. And just to give you an overview, we face this problem as professionals. How long ago, some of you old timers, how long ago was it okay to start advertising as a lawyer? When was it not legal to advertise as a lawyer?
20 years.
20 years? Maybe more, I think.
About 82.
It was in the 80s. Okay?
After I got out of law school, so. it
Yeah,
had to be-
I got out 86, okay?
I got out in 88.
So I know you could advertise then, but it was close. Okay,
And
so
be
let's
very
talk about,
specific,
yeah, you have to be very specific, and I think it's more still relaxed, right?
Very much.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the wisdom behind that instead of whining about it, okay? So we know that medicine, dreamland, right? We take a person named Arthur Sackler. Arthur Sackler, thank you. Arthur Sackler is a person who's dead. God rest his soul. Arthur Sackler, I think I read in the news where his family or somebody just got sued.
They have multiple ongoing lawsuits, and the pharmaceutical companies, Purdue Pharmaceutical. And I think what you need to know in terms of that, as Angela was mentioning, in 1997, Purdue Pharmaceutical produced the drug OxyContin. And OxyContin, quote unquote, was marketed in all physician, medical, dental offices because it was the best thing that the patient could have
Miracle
in terms
drug.
of their pain.
Yeah, and
It was that when these reps came to the office, they were telling us that-
Detail men.
Yeah, that's what
That's
they
what
were
they're called.
basically.
Detail
They would
men.
have
That's what they called them.
60 or 70,000 of these people going across the country, coming into your office saying it's unethical.
300
It's immoral for patients to have pain. You need to prescribe these, and they're non-addictive. They're non-addictive drugs. That's what we were told. They would come with boxes of these things with signs. They give them out to the patients. Go ahead.
No, it's only to make sure you don't miss some of these points. I am being rude, I know that, but I want to make sure this camera gets some of these things that's important. Arthur Sackler was a psychiatrist back in World War II. He fled Nazi Germany, and he came here, and he started advertising. The book refers to him as what he's commonly known as the ad man. You can Google this, okay? Well, that started advertising in the medical industry. Back then, Purdue Pharma, I think, was into what, laxatives or something?
Yeah, they weren't
Purdue
producing much
was a little company owned by them, but Purdue was a sleeper, just a little company owned by them, and probably didn't do anything significant until Arthur actually died. But what Arthur did is he pioneered advertising. Now, the advertising, one of the things a professional does is what? Tell their clients what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. And when we have advertising without regulation, with a professional reputation behind it, that can take somebody over the top and actually mislead them because they see somebody in a lab jacket or somebody with cufflinks on an Armani suit. They figure that professional advertising has impact. So without the regulations, they started advertising. Now, what started advertising, and gentlemen, you interrupt me because these people are expert, what happened is while they were advertising, okay, pandering starts to happen. Do we tend in advertising to tell people what they want to hear and paint a false narrative? It's incredible to these professionals. I've talked, well, they're like family to me. I trust them I trust my kids with them. They're amazed at how we went from no narcotics in this country. America flew in the face of England, France, all of the European trend to go to narcotics. America, of all places, the promiscuous place, right? America stood tall and refused to go there. And it wasn't until that advertising movement gained real power in the 90s mostly, right? And that's when you started to go to the hospital. I had a hip replacement, right? I'll never forget the nurse came in. Mr. Papa, how's your pain on 1 to 10? 10! I'm saying 10. I don't know when you're coming back. I don't know when something's going to wear off. I don't want to be in pain. I'm 10. Okay? Subjective, right? A little different than objective symptoms. You do workers' comp. You understand subjectivity and
Absolutely.
verifiable, evidence-based. So when you started pandering to clients and letting them choose the degree of pain medication, and you add to that this narrative,
Right.
that it is not addicting. I mean, that's way over the line. There's some huge lawsuits that have already happened and still in progress against Purdue Pharma because they taught their detail men to tell people it was not addicting. Now, you read the book, it's very fascinating, but I want to bring it back to Jim in a second here, because what happens is when we start pandering, there's a movement that was started in America to catch up with Europe. And that's a shame to let people suffer in pain. That's inhumane. It's became a movement, and the Veterans Administration, of all places, was the first to fall in line and declare the absence of the pain as a vital sign. Mm-hmm. You're a doctor.
Correct.
A vital sign to me, I'm not a doctor. It means if this sign, there's a problem, I could die. So a vital sign is what?
Vital sign.
Example.
Pulse,
Pulse?
blood pressure.
No pulse, your heart's not
Respiration.
beating. That's not good.
Respiration
Right?
and temperature.
Okay. No respiration, you're not
Temperature.
breathing, that's not good. Duh. Okay? They equated a lack of pain as a vital sign, which is totally illogical. But that rolled out with all these ad men pushing these narcotics into doctors' offices. And here's where it really gets really cool. What we're doing, we like to think, is a professional reform, too. The lawyers and the doctors are shaking hands in collaboration because we have a colleague that's in our group. How many patients does he see a day? 40. Have any one of you ever seen 40 clients in one day? Ever? You guys always see it. I mean, that's what kind of treadmill they're on. How could you possibly see 40 people? I think it turns out to be at 7 minutes per, right?
Sometimes less.
Or sometimes less. So literally now the doctors, just like you, have never heard of these things before. There's a medicinal intervention that you could have a pinch in your backside and you couldn't get high on alcohol or opiates for 30 days. You couldn't do it. You could not get high. How many people have heard that for the first time today? I push it in front of judges all the time. They'll keep them out of prison, stay on the Vivitrol. We put in a court order, we're done. We go home. We skip all the preliminary hearings and everything else. Okay, so having said that, it's part of our mission to educate people. So now I'm going to let you take it there where I interrupted you onto the narcotics and what we're doing about that.
Okay,
So-
you want to go? All right. So basically, this is a total abstinence way of treatment. There's an initial assessment. There's an evaluation of that assessment. There's counseling. Then there's the bridge placement. The bridge is removed. Sometimes there is toxicology screens done depending on the patient. Then the Vivitrol injection, more counseling, and counseling through the whole thing. And the Vivitrol is once a month. But that patient, every step along the way, is encouraged and to continue because of various milestones that they reach and diplomas, if you will, that they get to keep them on that track. All of the Suboxone clinics and methadone clinics, basically, as Angela said, it's a narcotic, and so it's for the rest of your life. You never get off of that. And the sequence of treatments that we have here eliminates that at some point in your life. It may be 3 months after you start the program, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, but the point is you get off of the narcotic altogether.
No, I couldn't have said
Okay.
it any better, Jim.
All right.
Let me have this for a minute. For those of you who may want to know Dreamland, the author of that is Samuel Quinones. And again, it just goes through the history of the opioid epidemic, really beginning from the end of the 1800s. And it goes through various government interventions, the pill mills, the Sackler family story. And it also goes through in the 30s and 40s when heroin and when Bayer Company was providing narcotics for women in childbirth, or women at one point, they were being given cocaine for a cold. It was very...
Valium's in that family, right?
And Valium, yeah. So it is a very synoptic, interesting reading, and I know you can get the book on Amazon for about $9 $9 in paperback. It's very worthwhile.
And you can get an audio book too. Hey, docs, can you take a look behind you a minute here? So I want to make sure we connect these dots here now. So this treatment is
That's true.
a collection of treatments, first of all. There's a company out there called The Bridge, right? That's the postcard you have. That's the thing that looks like a hearing aid, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
So if you had The Bridge, you can interrupt the withdrawal pain long enough, generally speaking, subject to health issues, to metabolize the opiate out of your system. If that's all you did, it will not reduce the cravings. It will not reduce the cravings. All the studies have shown that you will not be in pain. You probably would relapse in 4 or 5 days. You ever think you'd probably relapse in 5 days if you did nothing else? Okay? So,
Well,
that's a
opioid addiction is a chronic relapsing brain disease.
Right.
So that's
So
why
docs,
it happens.
the chances of them not relapsing, if that's all they did, is slim, right? Okay. Now, the Vivitrol, we know that it can't be administered, even though it's non-narcotic. Studies have shown that it tends to reduce cravings by as much as 80%. And you literally could not get high on alcohol or opiates if somebody shot it directly in your arm. In fact, they have to wear a medical alert badge in case you're in a car accident, so the usual analgesics won't work, right?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. So again, if that's all you did, unless you were clean, you couldn't even begin that.
correct.
Okay, so in 30 days' time, that will wear off. Is it likely the person's going to recover in 30 days? No. Okay. This is a biosocial issue here. It is very complicated. We're making it look very simple, and it's not. The counseling. You must have counseling, as Jim said, in all stages. So we're saying that there are 3 phases to this program, and the reason we're using this picture here is to share with you that, much like a 3-legged footstool, if one of these legs is missing, that plane ain't gonna land. Okay? There are 3 sets of landing gear here. That plane can fly and take off and land all day long if all 3 of those are, but I'm not so sure I want to be on that plane if that thing doesn't have all 3 landing gears. So we're hoping that that picture resonates with you on how it's 3. It's a trilogy. They must work together. That can't happen without collaboration. Okay? And that's the total abstinence message from the neutral. We're not here selling something. This is a CLE class. They're not here telling you to go to their office to get dental work. Or I'm not here telling you to go to my office. We're not even telling you to go to some VRN facility. All we're saying is that the mission of the nonprofit is to preach and teach total abstinence. Total abstinence. That's not some abstinence. The word total abstinence, everybody understands what total abstinence means with sex, right? Okay? You don't have untotal abstinence. You either are or you aren't. By the way, the Vivitrol blockade sits on receptors. You said flight, fight. The third big one is sex, right? Interestingly enough, studies have shown it does not interrupt sex. Okay? By the way, parenthetically, buprenorphine does, doesn't it? Sustained buprenorphine has resulted in a lot of sexual lack of all kind of things. And this isn't about a Viagra commercial, okay? By the way, I think that's the greatest genius of marketing ever. You might be ready to talk sometime. To me, if I'm going to advertise that somebody should use Viagra, what am I going to say? And by the way, if you have an erection that lasts 6 days, you better go to the doctor. You know? So, trust me, that's not the advertising we're talking about. Make sure you mark that to cut that out.
Yeah. That's why I didn't say.
I completely agree with what you're talking about with the program and the 3 steps and whatnot. My question is.
I'm going to connect it to our legal in a minute when we're
Well,
done with the science. Okay?
no, this is more on the medical end.
Okay. They're
Number
here.
1, how do you address the patients who don't have insurance? You've got a large population of the addicts out there that aren't covered by insurance to get into programs to get the Vivitrol, to get the bridge, I assume is highly expensive. And then, of course, we know counseling is very difficult to get without. And then number two, with the Vivitrol, I know a lot of big pharma companies do goodwill programs to get their drugs out there to people that can't afford it, to get them taking the drug. Is big pharma involved in getting the Vivitrol through this program for people that need it?
Can I give her, take a shot at
Go
part of
ahead.
that?
No,
I'm going to
because-
scurry over here. I've been doing this for 18 years, okay? And I can tell you right now that one of the reasons why we're standing in front of you and one of the reasons we're encouraging you to be a community leader and start talking about this is because we believe that government officials need to learn the difference between total abstinence and narcotic pain relievers, including legal pain medication. So part of what we're doing is telling people to ask your doctor. Don't rely on these guys. They're not your doctor. Ask your doctor. So we're trying to empower consumers to ask the questions. Number two, ask your legislator why he just signed some kind of a bill that funded 17 methadone clinics instead of a total abstinence thing. We're not saying we're challenging. Everybody who treats in any way possible is a brother to this organization. And we love everybody. We just think we have a different idea and a better widget. So we're saying that, right, tax dollars should be out there to support. As far as I know, in Butler, we have some kind of an $80,000 grant from the Bridge program, right?
Not only that, but I think we just received that $410,000 grant through BCC.
So they're starting to pay attention to us because we're knowledgeable, and we do. And for the most part, Vivitrol is covered by all hospitalizations now. Back when I first did this, I worked with a doctor when we used Rivia. There wasn't such a thing as a shot. He prescribed it off-label, and I can't tell you, we actually sued one of the healthcare providers to make them cover it. We weren't successful, but they eventually covered it while it was still lingering in the system. Yeah. So anyway, but welfare also covers it too.
Oh, do they now?
Yes,
Okay.
welfare covers the Vivitrol. They do not cover the Bridge, clears devices. Okay? So again, that's part of the mission of the coalition to get the latest and the best out there. Tonight, we might leave here and find some internet thing saying there's something better than the Bridge or Vivitrol or both, and we're going to be the first one to say after we do due diligence that this is something you should consider. But certainly it's something we should always debate and keep this debate to the forefront. And lawyers are debaters. I'm going to show you how this connects to your practice, and if you wanted to, you'd probably your waiting room would be packed with good paying clients that you're going to save their lives and their freedom. We'll go there later. I just wanted to cover all the medical issues with my friends here. Any other questions?
Are you saying on average Vivitrol, you would take a course of that for 3 months? I mean, the idea is to wean you off of the Vivitrol.
Oh, absolutely.
Right,
We don't want them to be addicted to Vivitrol either. Vivitrol is non-narcotic, not addicting. It's a naltrexone. It's not something that makes you happy or anything like that.
It's
So
the
you're saying
counseling
in
that's,
combination with the counseling,
You're right.
you would be weaned off the Vivitrol.
right.
Can I know you guys
Please.
you might be in a hurry, you've been here all day.
No, it's
Can you
fine.
talk to them about the counseling? It's not just somebody talking at you, right? Can you explain to them what the counseling program is about?
I mean, the counseling program is as important as the other two legs, and it's ongoing from day one because these are mechanical and medicinal modalities that are used. But you know, humans go up and down. Some have other psychological issues, reasons for abuse from day one. So we want to intercede on that and correct that issue for whatever it may be for that particular patient. The Bridge and the Vivitrol are the first half of the bridge. The counseling is on the other side of the bridge and beyond. And the counseling could last as long as that particular patient may need. But the way we designed it, we have psychiatrists and psychologists that use the one method. And what that means is all of us within our body have the ability to reward ourselves. And how do we do that? We do that with internal narcotics. So if you find a way through this that you're beyond the external factors and external abusers, you can get high on life yourself. And once you do that, do you really need an outside source to make you happy or to produce that dopamine that we ourselves can do?
You know, we call it the one technique, basically, and it's only endorphins. You know, all the receptors, the opioid receptors you have in your brain can be filled with the endogenous endorphins that you produce. And behavioral modifications, one way, diets another way, high-protein foods that have L-tyrosine and things in them that help to produce the dopamine. But the biggest thing is the behavioral modification. You know, you have to get out of that environment that keeps you in that place all the time, and that is it's really on you. But once you get to this point, then you're motivated. You want to get better. You want to continue on feeling high, if you will, but on your endorphins and not on external substance.
Hey, Doc,
Yes.
can I ask you this question then? I used to stand in front of the room for 18 years and people thought I was a nut job between Tony Robbins or an attorney at law. Do you know what you really want to do yet when you grow up, okay? So I used to always argue about getting high on life,
Right.
okay? And I always argued getting high on life. Most of you are not addicts or alcoholics. Most people don't get high on alcohol or opiates. So one of the things I'm really concerned about, and I know I have an educator administrator in front of me, if you're looking at the screen there, let's take a look at the extreme right hand, and we're in public education, everybody needs to walk through a school. Okay, so in my experience in the schoolhouse, I used to coach football, and I used to stand in the doorway and hold my arm up. If somebody hit my arm, I asked them if they played football, because they were tall. Okay, so on the one end of the extreme, we have 2% of the entire student population, which is reflective of the whole community, are intellectually gifted, or academically gifted, or athletically gifted. On the other hand, we might have 2% who are special needs. And if you take a look at it as a big bell, you remember the bell curve, and that's how a teacher always justified giving you a C when you thought, sure, that should have an A. But if you look at it in terms of a bell curve, the average person, we seem to be aiming all of our thoughts and resources to the 2% who are the worst off. There's a lot of addicts and alcoholics that are genuine criminals, okay? Does it shock you that criminals like to get high rather than go to work, okay? This is not something we should be aiming there, and we probably shouldn't be aiming here, but certainly we should be aiming where most of the people are. So doctors, do most people have an endogenous morphine system in their body that works?
Well, if they don't, they're not living.
Right. An endogenous morphine is actually a morphine that actually is produced from favorable circumstances that make you feel good.
Yeah, they're called endorphins
And we call them endogenous, I think, because it's internal. Right?
because it's internal.
So an alcoholic or an addict who is away from alcohol and is addict for a while can actually repair the endogenous system, can't they?
Get the system back on kilter again.
Right, and start getting high on life again. None of that's going to happen if they've got those cravings wrapped around them. So gentlemen, if I compare it to a computer, I get it in terms of a firewall. So I can't put a firewall, a Vivitrol wall around anybody unless they're clean.
Correct.
Hearing aid, bridge. Once I get them clean, that's not a big victory. It's like hitting a baseball. If you hit a baseball, you would not sprint across the pitcher's mound and go to second base and stand there. You have to go to first. So we get them clean, then we go to second base with the firewall and the blockade, and we don't stay there. We go back and repair that endogenous morphine system and bring them back to where they get high on life. And again, it requires all three. So I'm sorry to jump in again. Can you tell them a little bit about Steve Troy?
Steve Troy is one of our new...
Hope is Done.
That's the other book you might want to read.
Yeah.
Hope is Dope. Good.
Yeah, he's one of our new counselors who espouses the endorphin. And when we were able to meet with him and talk to him, we found him to be the third and the last key to the program that we have set up. He's a dynamic speaker. When I heard him, everything he was saying just made more and more sense in terms of why do you need an external influence? Why do you have to get a bottle of whiskey to get high? Why do you have to go looking for drugs here and there, and all the factors that it can precipitate on a negative basis and destroy families, all that stuff. So for me, counseling, and Steve Troy is one of our founded, what word am I looking for, benefactors. Jim, do you have anything to add on that?
That was pretty complete. Any other questions?
I have one, Doc. I want to ask about, I'm sorry,
Oh, yeah. I was
you
just-
go first.
Yeah, I was just curious about instances of relapse with addicts who take Vivitrol, be more, more common, I guess, maybe methadone or Suboxone methods. What is the relapse ratio like
go ahead,
compared to those other methods?
Now, just for 1 second, for any kind of studies like that, you should Google all this stuff.
What's the
Alkermes,
evidence of
Vivitrol,
relapse with
okay?
Vivitrol?
Now, non-statistical, they can tell you why the Suboxone would work maybe more often than the Vivitrol or whatever. But I just want you to know, you can Google all this stuff. Alkermes makes Vivitrol. And Suboxone is made by several companies. Buprenorphine is similar. If you Google those, they're going to give you statistics probably too, but I'm just trying to help you.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer your question, preliminarily, there's not a lot of data out there to compare the two, but you can Google all you want on methadone, Suboxone, and the number of relapses that have occurred. It's not uncommon for someone who has to go to a methadone clinic every day to get their dose to kind of feign that they put it in their mouth, in the office, bring it out and sell it outside.
Saliva and all.
Yeah, that occurs because it really comes down to a question of how much money and how many more doses can I get with the dose that I'm getting. And I think that's part of,
Why is it daily, Doc?
because in terms of management, when you go from a higher to a lower dose, as you get off, they're trying to wean the narcotic, but it's like, I have a headache. I'll give you an aspirin, and then tomorrow I'll give you a Tylenol, and maybe we'll reduce the dose. It comes down to it's the same thing.
Because it's so narcotic. In fact, I have heard, and I'm asking if I'm correct, I have heard that sometimes you can put a bridge on somebody, and if it's methadone, they have to have 2 bridges. It takes longer to metabolize than 5 days.
That's the variability. Yeah, it's rare. I mean,
But the Vivitrol, or the methadone, most people equate that with long lines at a facility. 24 hours, most people need it again, or less. And because the law won't let them get it most often in more than 1 dose because it's so narcotic and sold, it requires people to go back to the clinic every day. And more than that, I think the welfare reimbursement actually pays you more mileage if you have to drive to a farther away county to get it.
Yeah,
That seems to be
the key here, Angela, on that is there's incentives for you to continue on methadone, even though over the number of years it's been shown that the relapse is very high. So what we're trying to
Well,
do,
in fact, maybe they haven't relapsed at all because they never got off.
Well,
The narcotic.
yeah, they can't get off that
quote,
last,
quote unquote relapse.
A continued addiction.
yeah, that last little bit to get off is the fear that people have of what these withdrawal symptoms are going to be. And they just can't get themselves to get off of it. That's why, yes.
It seems like there's two different things at play in the Vivitrol and sort of the more traditional ways of treating opioid addiction. It seems with the Vivitrol, they're actually taking the craving phenomenon away, and with the others, it seems like it's really just trying to placate the craving.
Well,
And
it
so
blocks,
how does those two very different approaches, how does that kind of play into what may or may not be a relapse rate?
well, it blocks the receptors, but the cravings are still there, the behavior is still there, and you have to get through that point to where you, as an individual, are self-motivated to
But studies have shown 80% reduction in cravings on the naltrexone.
Right, right.
Now, the cravings are
But it's
always
still
there.
there. It's
And
still a
by
little
the-
bit there.
By the way, I think.
Naltrexone is the.
But you can't.
The Vivitrol. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm confusing the heck out of everybody. Naltrexone,
Is
Is
Vivitrol.
Vivitrol.
Rivia is a form of naltrexone and tablet. Naltrexone shot, Vivitrol, Alkermes does that, time release. Naltrexone implant. Naltrexone is not a scheduled controlled substance, it's not an addicting substance. So, in essence, I think the doctors are saying, yes, they agree with you. That's exactly, you hit it right on the head.
And the counseling gets you through that last bit to get on. Yeah. And, you know, really, Suboxone, it's just a maintenance. It's not, it's a treatment, but it's a maintenance, is all it is. It's a continuous narcotic every day.
They call it maintenance.
Well, and the reason it's perpetuated is because there's government funding. And if there's money, people are going to open up clinics. And if there's not a better way, then you just continue that because, as you know, we do have an epidemic where in 2015-16, there were 50,000 or more overdose deaths. And even now, with the introduction of Narcan, you can buy it over the counter. I mean, Jim and I...
Narcan just reverses it instantaneously.
John,
You
we
go
don't
into
there yet,
withdrawal
because
as
that's my
soon as
next
you get
battery
there.
of questions.
All right.
We're going to arrest that in a minute. But here's what I want to make sure that you got. How many people in here would be here listening to the three of us unless you had to be? I want to see the person who will raise their hand. Unless you knew what we were going to say before you came in, would you be here? No. Okay, so what we're saying is that it's hidden in plain sight. It's not even knowing what you don't know. That's our mission here, to start this debate so that the best will surface. And so what we're saying is that the entire medical industry, who's basically with CMEs, how many of you guys are supposed to have per year?
30.
30, okay. And you take those what? You go somewhere in a conference, can you do them online?
Usually I do.
Okay, so I know you guys,
Yeah,
you're different,
yeah.
you're very studious, but, okay, now they see 40 people a day. How much time would they be able to understand some of this new stuff? They don't teach them this in medical school, do they? Just like they didn't teach you practice management that we talked about today in law school. Maybe it's a professional shortcoming, but maybe it's this information explosion, things happen too fast. But the bottom line is, when you have a mouth and you know how to talk and you know something that's important, that's why we're here, quite frankly. And that's why we're hoping you guys join the movement, basically, with the Facebook and all that stuff like that. So now that I've kind of wrapped that up, I do want to go to the Narcan, unless somebody has a question. You know, the judge always says, anything else from either side here? So I'm saying, anything else on that topic? Now, I'm going to talk about Narcan. What is Narcan? First of all, anybody know what Narcan is called? It's really not Narcan. It's what? Naloxone, right? Who said that? Thank you. Naloxone. Okay? What's naloxone, otherwise called Narcan? Can you tell them what it is? I know
Antagonist.
teachers have it now.
It's a narcotic antagonist is what it is.
In the nurse's office.
Yeah, there's some school districts that make teachers carry it. I know you, where you're going, you're a traditional guy. But I'm telling you, do you agree there are teachers in some school districts who have it?
Oh, likely, yes.
Policemen and firemen carry it too. Tell them what it is.
It's just a narcotic antagonist. It totally blocks what you're going through in terms of the narcotic. And it can result in very violent behavior. All of a sudden you don't have that drug, and now you're combative, now you're swinging, now you're doing things. In fact, there's some police departments that won't let their officers carry it anymore because a number of them have been injured when these people get the Narcan.
Doctor, physiologically, when a person is Narcan, he's brought back to life, basically.
Yeah.
But he's what? In violent withdrawal. So
Exactly.
There are every one of these people. Listen, there's a radio talk show in Youngstown, Ohio. I'm on the border. I'm further away than you guys. And I remember hearing a guy calling, and he said, "This Narcan stuff is crazy. It cost 2 firemen and a policeman, and Narcan somebody 5 and 6 times." People have heard that debate, right? This guy actually wanted people to be tattooed. So if you saw a tattoo and you were Narcan before, they would let you die. Yeah. But listen, hold on. Aside from being crazy, right? Aside from being a little extreme, that was the only way to maybe stop somebody getting 8, 9 of these. So this is an uninformed public out there. So is it any wonder that somebody got Narcan, they came back to violent withdrawal, and they basically get up and take off, and they go, where are they going? Their favorite drug for an addict is what? More, okay?
Yeah.
So they're going to go to blunt those cravings. So this is important, and this is one of the things that the coalition is advocating, that when a person is Narcan, they should be taken to a bridge facility where they're no longer in the withdrawal pain, and they've got 5 days to make some decent decisions instead of running. Now, the other ones is a situation, a person gets Narcan, they'll take them to an emergency room, they'll let them stay there till they stabilize, and then they usually leave them, but they're usually relapsed again within hours.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon. I mean, I have family members as first responders, and I've been told by him that there are places in and around the city where they may go to the same address once, maybe twice, 3 times a day for Narcan, and they have to administer it irrespective of anything because they're being called out for an overdose. To me, that makes no sense at all. And personally, Narcan is a narcotic. I understand its reason for reversal, but that's putting a drug in a general public that anyone can get, and you create more of a potential issue if you don't use it correctly, because once you give the Narcan, that Narcan is not metabolized and eliminated right away. It can re-narcotize the patient.
Does the bridge program work in concert with the rehabilitation centers like Gateway and some of the other ones scattered throughout the region?
They don't use that.
They're not even.
They're not
partner
even
at all.
considering that, and that is frustrating to us because I guess from an economic and again a personal point of me, from me, you have multiple rehab areas in and around Pittsburgh, Monroeville, and what have you. Most of those are inpatients, and most of those are given money by the government or private insurance. What we're trying to do here is to allow that person, once they have the bridge and the withdrawal symptoms are removed or eliminated during that 5-day period, they can go back to work, whether it be alcohol or narcotic abuse. So it doesn't have, we don't plan this for an inpatient facility, but it could be used in an inpatient facility. And that's the road that we're trying to make here is why isn't what we're doing becoming more used modality? And that's what we're working for.
And Doc, there are studies that suggest that an in-house facility may be something that is already a problem or has a problem because it's too sterile of an environment from where the person has to function. They call them triggers and whatnot. The people you hang out with, the people you see, the smells, the this and the that. There's a strong argument, aside from the huge financial, down in Bonita Springs, Florida, where we have one of these VRN facilities, I'm told that you have a 3-week waiting period at minimum, and it costs $65,000 a month to be in an in-house facility. So we already know you're out $65,000, or your insurance carrier is. And number 2, you can't work, right? Number 3, when you come home, you're going to face all the things, the root cause, those issues that the counseling is working on. You're going to have all of those things brand new in your face again. And so that's important to have a modality that works in your body to keep you from getting high while you transition and become a different person in this remake, and your endogenous endorphin production goes up and you start to become able again.
What about the private facilities like the Betty Ford or places like that?
You probably can get any of these things if you ask them. But our experience so far is that,
They're not pushing it.
no. Well, think about it. Some of these facilities have a bottom line that depends on the brick and mortar facility, how many people come back every month.
I think you were alluding to that, too.
I don't like to allude to that.
Yes.
I'm hoping that that's not what's going on, but certainly, so so the possibilities are, rather
The
than.
clinic funding in Pennsylvania has changed over the years. It's been shrunk down to, I think, 28 days now. Where it
In-
used to be far longer.
In June 11th, 2019, we're having a breakfast at a church up here on May 11th. On June 11th, 2019, we've been invited by the Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania, and that's Turzai. Okay? We're invited to the steps of the Capitol to explain total abstinence, non-narcotic. Part of the reason why we're here is to get people to either come with us or start sending Facebook messages that are all about TAMAT, total abstinence, medicine-assisted treatment. We think that counseling alone probably wouldn't work. But we know when you say MAT, medicine assistant, that also includes Suboxone, methadone, and whatnot. So when we say total abstinence medicine-assisted treatment, we have all of them, including the airplane, all 3 landing gears, including the counseling. We're not saying we have all the answers, but we're saying we have a bunch. There's an old expression, never let perfect be the enemy of damn good. Let's start somewhere. If not now, then when? And if not us, then who? So, and we have actually morphed ourselves 2 or 3 times.
We have.
There was a time we didn't have a clue what one meant. Only need endorphins, okay? There was a time where that's a new one in our vocabulary.
That basically joins science to the counseling and
Right.
the other things that we do. There is scientific evidence for why these things
We knew that you could get high on life, but we didn't have a clue what the science was behind it. But this counselor actually has about 7 or 8 exercises that you can do, including exercise. It has been known to produce endorphins and actually get you high. Some people don't like to exercise. Brett Favre, would he have 3 relapses or something like that? Did he need exercise? Probably not. But there's this science actually has about 9 different exercises that you can do to rehabilitate your natural endorphin producing mechanisms in your brain. So
Yeah, I think the paradigm shifts that we've seen, in my mind, are one, drug addiction is not a voodoo aspect. It's a medically treatable disease, and that's the way it should be looked at. And along that line, you just continue, as Angelo said, morphing our thinking based upon what we're seeing and what needs to be done.
And Doc, right over here is our other triad, okay? Educators, law, medicine. Go into the public school and our ELM project. And again, we start the debate and we maintain the debate, and we even get better when people participate with a neutral, non-agenda, non-profit deal. The elm tree itself is called the freedom tree, right? Remember, that's the species of tree the Patriots used to meet under in Boston to plan the revolution until the British chopped it down when they found out what was going on. And of course, ever since then, even Lafayette took elm trees back to Europe and planted them all over the place in terms of calling it a freedom tree. To this day, even though the elms took a pounding with blights and whatnot, most of our main streets in this country once upon a time had elms in them. But the ELM Project, education, law, and medicine, what a great, powerful organization. That's the 3 pillars of the community, and you're one of them. The lawyers, okay? The educators and the medical profession working together. It is so powerful, that collaboration.
Yeah, you have to remember, I think, when you think of a substance abuser, most of us, perhaps in the past, have the idea of the homeless person or the criminal. Substance abuse affects all socioeconomic aspects. The doctor's son, the lawyer's daughter, there's a reason why they get into that scenario, and what we want to do is just provide an escape from that.
And so the goal is here to present, as we just did, to teach, to recruit, and to direct. We're going to orient, support, and direct like-minded professionals in all 3 pillars, including researching and technology and whatnot. But it's always a directed, neutral, not-for-profit, learn more, know more. Everything we have that we've just given you is not for sale. We will gladly share everything we know with anybody. We just need to let you know that we know some things, and maybe you'll learn something later. But if we go all the way back to our beginning slides here, you know, I can tell you how many times we've had really productive organizational meetings and whatnot, and all at once people leave and say, hey, that was really cool. Now what, okay? Well, now what is, by the way, that was my grandson in Haiti working with the food. Now what is basically the Facebook and staying in touch with us and making sure you leave your name there. We have files that we want to refer people to. We want people to join our coalition, and just let's make a difference. Let's leave a legacy. You know? District Attorney, the president judge back that time was Thomas Durr. He allowed this defendant to have a court order that he was required to take that tablet every day. He would go local confinement, which got him work release. And as far as I know, he's totally recovered. And I started doing those cases over and over. So what happened was I started talking about this, and other CLE classes would say, I can't believe you had that CLE class about something like that. And it was, you know, some people would whine, some people would complain, but nobody seemed to believe me. But I was doing it literally for 18 years in CLEs and things like that to this day. Some of you have never heard of Vivitrol. I think nobody probably in this room has ever heard of the bridge before, and it still continues to amaze me what people don't know. So what happened is I created this nonprofit corporation, started hanging out with doctors because I don't think I should stand up here and talk about medical concepts without experts next to me. And that's happened. Now, what happened was the naltrexone had a little bit of defects to it. Important. It was a daily tablet. We had one guy actually cook the prescription in the microwave so it was no longer effective. You're an addict, right? You don't quit being an addict in 12 hours, okay? So, and it only lasted 24 hours. So the parents still had to watch them take it, make sure they didn't spit it out, make sure they didn't do anything else with it. And so it had its ups and downs, and I'll never forget, I don't know the exact day, but I'll never forget when Doc called me. Angelo, how's it going? You got to hear this. I hear there's a shot coming out. What? The Revia, the naltrexone. I hear there's a shot coming out. They're going to make a shot that lasts 30 days. I said, Doc, this is so amazing, because a judge would probably respond to that more, because for 30 days the person can't get high. He says, well, I forgot who told me about it, but I heard somebody in my waiting room talking about it. And this is how it happens, I guess. This is part of your education on the newest things out, right? He says, I ran out and Molly, which is his secretary, but Molly let him go. His business card here somewhere, and I'll call you when I find it. Now, Doc, I love him dearly, but he says, I'll call you when I find it. I probably still wouldn't know it to this day, 18 years ago. I got in my car, I drove down his office, and we tore his whole office apart. And I found a card by Cephalon. Is Cephalon a pharmaceutical of some kind, or were they? Cephalon came out with it first, and I don't know what all the chemistry that goes back and forth of the business bureaucracy, but Alkermes eventually bought the product, and it was not approved by FDA. It went, it seems to me, I think it took 5 years, I'll bet, before FDA ever approved it. But a doctor can prescribe something off-label, can't they? And he prescribing it off-label because he's a guy who had courage, and he knew it worked. And he was doing the injection. I believe, he's never told me this, but I believe that one of the reasons he's retired today is because of me. Because I started having attorneys refer him cases all the time. And he started doing, I know he was one of Alkermes' best customers for years. He sent more. Now back then, we had no bridge, we had no one counseling. It was only Revia and a court order. Now, the interesting place the legal profession played in all of that was that we have several ways to make the treatment binding. I'll never forget Dr. Woolhandler's secretary told me, Mr. Papa, I'm so glad to meet you. I know it's over the phone, but we really like your patients. Well, yeah, I never met you. Oh, they show up, and they do what they're supposed to. And I said, well, because they're going to go to jail if they don't. Their probation was hooked to it. So with that coercion, and again, remember, it takes a while to redevelop these endogenous morphines. And I'm starting to think now it was less about the person just testing the limits and maybe more about a sustained, uninterrupted, seamless blockade. So we started taking it from criminal law to professional discipline, nurses. I had a nurse that was stealing what's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? 10. Okay, leave a handful and leave and come back, and she was scooping them into her smock off of all of her patients. She was addicted too. Nurses, real estate, attorneys. Lots of people had substance abuse problems and their licenses were in jeopardy. So as long as I had an authority figure that could impose the treatment plan long term and make it binding like a probationary order, employment, for example. Dr. Joe, just basically at lunchtime today, I thought I had thought of everything, and he rolled one out that I never even thought of. Workers' compensation. Workers' compensation, there's lots of people on workers' compensation that are on the narcotic pain relievers and whatnot. A workers' compensation order could be tailored to make the treatment binding. An employment contract, an anti-nuptial agreement, a custody agreement. These things I'm saying are not just ideas. I've done them. Okay? So when you connect the law and the binding treatment to a treatment that works, okay, it's probably not a good idea to get treatment that doesn't work, okay, you really have the makings of something very cool.
Can I ask about, while the doctor is still here?
Yeah.
The medical side effects of this. I mean, everything you see on TV is, this is going to be a great drug, and then for 5 minutes they tell you how horrific it might be.
If you choose to hack your family with a machete in 12 hours, call the doctor. I got it. I know all those disclaimers. But first of all, I wanted you to protect them because that's all in there. Alkermes, Vivitrol, Google that so they don't miss any of those. But go ahead.
You want to give them the mic?
Yeah.
Well, as far as the Vivitrol, you still can take the narcotics, and you take it in increasing doses, higher and higher and higher, and it has no effect. You can't get high when you're on the Vivitrol. But the downside of that is, as you take increasingly higher doses, your respiratory depression starts to set in, as any narcotic does. It will depress that. And you could die if you take enough of it. So
Doctor,
that's a big downside.
That's a behavioral issue where the person is trying to overcome the blockade.
Yeah, and they're overcoming it on their own without any
Right.
counseling, those kind of things. So you
By
need
the way, we see
all of those
almost
things.
no cases reported of that, but technically speaking, a person could try to overcome the blockade.
Right, right. And soreness at the injection site, things like that, maybe some necrosis of the skin, things like that. They're rare cases, but they can occur. And beyond that, there's not a whole lot of bad things that happen with Vivitrol.
I'm just shocked that this seems like such a wonderful thing to be able to do, and it hasn't.
We're shocked that you're shocked, by the way.
Yeah, well, it started out in alcohol abuse, and the natural transition was to go into the opioid abuse or other substance abuse problems. Yeah, it's been around for a little while.
And again,
But now with the injection, it makes it simpler
If you go
to.
back to the pandering and whatnot, and people not even knowing, you can't believe how many people have surgery done and become addicted from a surgery. One of our doctors reports that we have a panel that can test somebody and show them within a 90% accuracy genetically whether you're predisposed to become addicted from one pain application. That's the kind of science that's available now.
Yeah.
There's references in the big book from Alcoholics Anonymous. It's called the Big Book. There's references of some doctors saying, too bad there isn't a magic shot. That was mentioned in 1930, okay? Now, we're here to tell you that we believe, right, Doc? When I say we, medical, legal, we believe there's no such thing as any kind of a magic shot, including this one. We believe there must be a proper assessment with proper fact-finding, with proper medical findings, and then an individually prescribed treatment regimen that would probably include the bridge if necessary. Maybe somebody's not in wide open withdrawal. Maybe they just got out of jail and they're clean. They could go right to the Vivitrol blockade, and we know that that person should be counseled, and the person's going to have to take the injection for 3 months, maybe 6 probably from most of the studies, and you would be ready to transition off. And even if you relapse, you'd at least know the way back. So. Opiates. No crack cocaine, yeah. That's tomorrow's adventure. Talking about tomorrow's adventure, get ready for the marijuana to roll in. The marijuana that's being grown now and adulterated, you can't believe. It's not the marijuana some of us, I did not inhale. It's not the one that we probably are familiar with. It's amazing. It's like this bonanza, like all at once every state wants to cash in on marijuana. Okay, but anyway, we know the DA is going to get paid. So if we know the DA is going to get paid, does he get paid depending on how many cases he gets? No, he gets paid. So we know already that his dream day is to not have you in front of him in court. So we also know that he wants to keep you from coming back. And if he ran for office, he's probably saying, I'm a cowboy, I'm tough on crime. That's who I am. I'm the cop. I'm the county's top cop. So that's their agenda. If you want to know what he fears most, is he does not want to have the policeman out there bad-mouthing him that we arrest him and that weak son of a gun lets him loose and gives him a little snap on the wrist. So he knows the first way to become unreelected is have all the police department talking about how weak he is, right? So he's got to be tough on crime to survive, to continue to get paid. And if he has less cases in front of him, he likes that. We know the common pleas judge sits up above, and he actually gets paid whether he has cases or not. So if you can keep your case from being in front of him again, he'll like that. In a bigger sense, he doesn't want recidivism. His fear is that someday somebody like Bill O'Reilly, well, Bill O'Reilly's not on TV anymore, but who does what Bill O'Reilly used to do? Anyway, they call somebody up and say, this is a case in Lawrence County where a judge let somebody out. He crossed the center line and killed a family of 5. That's their worst constant nightmare. Okay? So we know that's what he doesn't want to do. So I am saying to you, go all the way back to what we talked about civilly, and remember, that's what their gig is. That's what they want. That's what they want. What's your client want? I don't want to go to jail. Again, my cousin Vinny, right? Do you remember when Attorney Gambini, was it Gambini? Mm-hmm. And Judge Chamberlain Haller? We talked about this morning, but I forgot who it was. Anyway, he says, Mr. Gambini, well, let me have a little bit of fun. It's getting late. Mr. Gambini, you need to tell me whether your client pleads guilty or not guilty. Well, Your Honor, it's these 2 Utes, they thought they were doing something, and one of them took tuna fish. Please, Mr. Gambini, I want to hear one word from you and one word only. Guilty or not guilty? I get what you mean. Apparently you don't. Remember, and he held him in contempt 22 times? And he said, Mr. Gambini, you apparently refuse to acknowledge the state of, is it Alabama or Arkansas? Alabama's procedures. And in Alabama, we have an arraignment, and that is followed by a trial. You want to skip those procedures, and you just want to be able to go right past the trial because you find yourself in the unusual situation of a defense attorney whose client says they didn't do it. I get it, Your Honor, not guilty. And then we want. So again, the defendant clearly doesn't want to go to jail. In terms of motivation, gentlemen, I am telling you, all of your fancy degrees and everything, Robert Woolhunter's secretary was very right. My clients were going to pay attention because they didn't want to go to jail. Have we met anybody who, in your life, who wants to go to jail? Okay? So that's a very important thing that you have to remember. Okay, your client doesn't want to go to jail. So here's me back in Butler County. I'm telling the judge, Your Honor, the goal for all of us is my client doesn't want to go to jail. You don't want him to be in front of you, and you don't want him to go back and keep going back and forth to jail. And by the way, it costs the taxpayer $75 a day, from what I understand, and this person will lose his job, so we get no more withholding. His whole family will be on welfare. They will be in some kind of crisis. 94% of incarcerated females in Pennsylvania are there for substance abuse. I think that this is a whole cascade of bad outcomes, and we both don't want to do that. So the question is, Your Honor, how about if I found a way to do that? So finally, I had somebody that would listen to me, and he says, okay, Mr. Papa, I've heard the word treatment before. Now remember People have gone in and said treatment, and they never went to the doctor. And the judge is embarrassed, lots of egg on his face. Treatment, they went into a narcotic, kept on relapsing. Or treatment, they didn't do the counseling. So what we did is on a journey over 18 years, again, going back to the anvil of litigation, every time I was in front of a judge and I had an aggressive prosecutor, it made us get better. And as we got better and snugger and tighter, it got better and it started to work. So I'm telling you now that when we go in court, I have a phone right now that one of these doctors can fill out something that you could attach to the PSI. You were talking about behavioral modification. We have a 128 paragraph behavioral modification contract with the specifics in it. It actually has a catch-all cut and paste order. It can be engrafted as part of the probationary terms into the order of court. I have the secretary, the doctor, email it to me. I get the source results on the LACO printer right next to the judge's chambers, and I have it printed and I hand it to the judge, and the judge staples it to the court order. It's binding for the period of probation, which could be 5 years. Seamless. Seamless. That didn't happen overnight. But it happened over 18 years, having a prosecutor push back. How do we know he's going to do this? How do we know he's going to do that? Part of my retainer contract says in there that you're hiring me by my invitation, not yours. You are not only telling me I can, you are authorizing and directing me. It says in our retainer agreement that if I suspect reasonably that you have relapsed, I'm supposed to call the authorities immediately. That sounds like, wow, sue time, right? No, I can choose who I represent. I have the family there. You want me? That's what I come with. Do you want your kid to quit using drugs? Yes. It's time to man up, woman up. Nowadays it could be either up, but stand up and do it, because I'm going to empower you to take the withdrawal away. I'm going to blockade you from relapsing, and if you choose to do it after that, I think that's what's called a criminal. I choose not to represent criminals. We have public presentations and we say we have no time, patience, or sympathy for people who pass this poison on the streets of our country if we know we can take the pain away and blockade them, and they still want to do it. Some people belong in jail. I don't have an answer for everything. So we say that to the client. And by the way, I have done it twice, and I've called the adult probation. None of those people ever went to jail because I called them, and that mitigated it. And I showed the judge that he gave me permission that, no, but they don't want him back in jail. They don't. They don't want him to kill somebody. So if we're looking at the Loeffler analysis and doing what everybody wants, what the things we can agree to, at the end of the day, the guy didn't go to jail. He kept on working. His family, his workers' comp, or his withholdings were still paid. The taxpayer saved $75 a day on something that wasn't going to work anyway. If he went to jail, he's only going to meet other people he can buy and sell to. And it all skipped that, but it has to be accountable. I tell every one of these clients, I will not represent you unless you sign. I mean, the contract is very, very telling. I have a 30-minute video that basically orients you on all the ways Charlie down the street that's going to press for every advantage is going to be maybe the guy you want. There's people out there that say, man, if that policeman forgot to Mirandize you, I'm going to get you off of this or something like that. There's a little issue here, though, too. And I want to make sure I'm moving past my outline, and I might miss some stuff here, but I want to make sure that I cover this one. Wow, it's 2:52. We are Sixth Amendment lawyers first, right? There's a whole panoply of constitutional rights that we are the watchdogs for. That's called the Sixth Amendment. We're supposed to use our most zealous efforts to defend our clients. But I'm telling you, you're now also an Eighth Amendment attorney on the right to be free and clear health-wise and whatnot. So they do walk a delicate balance there, but you have to do both. Everybody in here know what an ARD is? An ARD is called Accelerated Rehabilitative Disposition. Fancy way of saying you get one free, right? The DUI law was passed, and there was a bunch of people who actually got all kind of DUIs. There was a huge glut of cases. And so they created what really is, I think, the first real diversionary court. It's ARD. ARD, let's make sure we summarize that so you get your money's worth here. ARD is a special pass that if you say, I'm going ARD, generally, you get your license suspended for what, 30 days? Most often? Depending on your BAC.
Depends on the BAC.
And depends on the judge, what mood he's in. But usually it's about 30 days. Okay, so the average points are: 1, you actually do not plead guilty. Okay? You get your license suspended, and the judge says if you don't do anything in the next year, sometimes I'll cut that to 6 months, I will null pros the charges. That's ARD. If you get picked up tonight, you'll know what ARD is. If you have somebody in your office and you do the task list we showed you how to get paid, that's ARD. Okay? So it starts with an application to the DA's office, and the DA is the gatekeeper. Lots of people have said that the DA shouldn't be the gatekeeper. It's not fair, but the Superior Court has upheld the fact that the gatekeeper is the DA. So the DA can say what requirements he has, and that's generally it. Now, we can say that if you don't do it again, your record is expunged, but there's still a record that you had it, because you can only get one every 10 years, right? So there's certainly some fragment of a record left. Make sure you tell your client. Huh?
Except for an Allegheny County.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Sometimes the judges will let a second one through.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've seen it happen.
Interesting.
It's-
You know what that is?
Probation without verdict, too.
You know what that is? That's judicial recognition of we're putting people in jail who really aren't criminals.
They'll ignore the statute, too.
Okay, now please don't let me forget probation without verdict, okay? Okay, so ARD is a diversionary court. ARD, you only get one, generally speaking. ARD, blah, blah, blah. I think I've covered everything with ARD. The problem is, and you've been lots of serious articles written by the American Bar Association criticizing you guys and me, that people are so infatuated with ARD that they're ignoring defenses that could be, oh, you're ARD eligible, go that way. The policeman never Mirandized, the police never did anything, the test never came back or something like that. So you always have to remember you're still a Sixth Amendment attorney, even in the scenario we're telling you about. You should not ignore a solid defense. Definitely not do that. Because your obligation, unless your guy tells you, and you should have it in writing, that he shows you, I don't want you to spend any time researching legal issues or everything. I'm going ARD. Okay? Protect yourself from them, because you got the ineffective assistance of counsel thing out there, right? Okay, so now let's push ARD aside and let's go to what you were talking about. Probation without verdict, and they call that PWV. Okay, what's probation without verdict? Probation without verdict is some form of a diversionary again. If you can go to court and show the court that this was basically caused by substance, and you have a doctor that'll sign off on that, you can get a pass, and they'll let you go for a period of time, and then you go back and file a petition that you haven't relapsed, you haven't been a bad person, and then you can get it dismissed as though it never happened. Okay? Right. I'm not exactly, but it's in the book that you guys got emailed to you that most of you didn't get yet, from what I understand. But there's another statute out there called disposition in lieu, right? That's another one. It's in the Drug Act. It's sneaky. It's in the Drug Act. In the Drug Act, it's disposition in lieu. Disposition in lieu is... Huh?
I was going to say leave that off. Go ahead.
Yeah, disposition... I'll let it expire on its own. Disposition in lieu... Disposition in lieu is a situation that's very similar. You've got to read the statute to us. There's some tricky things in there, and I might even have them crossed up because I don't want to take the time to look it up. But disposition in lieu is something that you get disposition in lieu of, and again, it's like all these checkpoints, but these diversions are not possible unless it's some kind of crime that doesn't involve violence. In criminal law, we have what's called your scuzzball relationship. A criminal is, technically speaking, in law court, in criminal law, is taught Duquesne, that's a scuzzball. And the crime raises up in punishment in direct relation to the scuzzballiness scale. How scuzzy were you? Okay. So as a DUI person, the scuzzbally factor doesn't raise too high, so same thing with substance abuse if you have something like that. So you already have some diversions there. Okay? You need to read the statute and make sure there's something else all by itself. It's called a diversionary drug court. What's a diversionary drug court? Anybody here at your county has a diversionary drug court, a formal drug court? Nobody? Yeah, they have this National Association of Drug Court Professionals, by the way. They call it, okay, my suggestion is, I have been in front of drug courts and I've been in front of courts where I don't have a drug court. I'd much rather be in front of a court that doesn't have a drug court. Some people have drug courts and they pay lip service to treatment. Again, the DA is the guardian in most drug courts, although it's the judge who really controls it. It's different than ARD. And I've tested that down in Somerset. What county is Penn State in?
Sutton County.
Yeah, there was a judge down there who was real nice to me. Judge Lobaugh, was it Lobaugh? No, Lobaugh is in Venango County. Anyway, he had a beard, glasses, tall guy. Anyway, so their drug court is, I have a really neat paper out too, by the way, specialty courts. Specialty courts are called boutique courts. In the big cities, they have prostitute courts, they have homeless courts, they have veterans courts, they have, it's all recognition of we can't handle the staggering caseload, so we're going to have specialty diversions around the law and not go through preliminary arraignment, formal arraignment, motions to dismiss, trial by jury, and they have these diversions. Every time you take a diversion, make sure you don't have a Sixth Amendment issue out there, or if you think there might be one, make your client sign off that I don't want you to pursue that. The ones that's really dangerous is when somebody has a specialty court, they usually get funding for that. I know you're a funding guy, you know that. So they hire a bunch of people. Here we go. We've heard that before. Okay, they hire an administrator, they hire a scheduler, they hire a caseworker, they hire a this, and they hire a that. In the name of saving money from all these cases in this main system, right? Now, the drug court is afraid to look like they're too lenient. So they don't let anybody in if they have this, if they have that, if they have this, if they have that. That disqualifying list is so strict that nobody who gets into the diversionary court needs it. It was only a one-time thing. It was never going to happen again anyway. So now they've doubled the cost of the system, have not reduced the case loss, and here we go. The beat goes on. Bump, like with Cher, right? Drums keep bounding rhythm to the, I hate inefficient, government inefficiency. So, and when you go there as a defense attorney, you're standing there and saying, Your Honor, I'm here on behalf of so-and-so and so-and-so and yada, yada, and treatment, and I want to talk about bridges, and I want to talk about naltrexone, and I want to talk about blockades and all that stuff like that. And the judge, shut up. Did you apply for drug court? Yes, I did, Your Honor, but we were rejected. Next. Okay? So sometimes that hurts you. So I've actually, I'm a zoning lawyer too. I've done zoning law in Newcastle for a long time. What do we know when you go and you want to have some kind of a new thing in your neighborhood? What do you call that when you want to get permission and it's not in the ordinance? Variance, right? Why can't we have a drug court variance procedure where somebody says, Your Honor, I know the rules say this, but in this particular case, the judgment of the court should be set aside because this obviously hardship variance, right? And we know all the same thing. We're talking about human beings now. We know that metabolism rates and things like that are as varied as the number of shoe sizes in this room here. One thing these doctors know, and one thing that we know, is that one size fits nobody. One size in human behavior fits no one, usually not even the intended purpose. So that goes back to this idea that what kind of a trial advocate are you? Are you a person who's afraid to get yelled at by a judge? Or are you a person that doesn't like to get yelled at? Nobody's looking for trouble, but you don't care if it means you're going to shut your mouth. And I can remember being in Crawford County years ago. There was a judge there who's not there anymore. And halfway through my pitch on Vivitrol and blockades, we didn't have bridges then, there's 50 lawyers behind me, right? You know, everything in criminal law, they do like a cattle call. They have them all show up. Standing there, call the case, please, blah, 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 blah. Okay, Your Honor, in this particular case, blah, 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 blah. Mr. Papa, why do I need to hear this? In front of everybody. Now, I went from 6 feet, I was 6'2" when I started law school. I went from 6 feet down to 2 inches. But with that 2 inches that I had left, I said, because you're about to sentence him and affect his life, the rest of his life, I'm not going to sit there and take that. I'm going to put my 2 cents on the plate there. And basically, I said that. And so then he put me at the end of the list to punish me, took everybody first. And then I stepped up, and I knew he wasn't going to listen then. He just heard 50 people, right? So then I orally moved the court for a special listing, okay? That was before I'm about to teach you something that's much better than that. What happened was he didn't listen to a word I said, but the DA gave me a better plea. So it turned out, okay, And that was in Meadville, okay? Now, something very important. Rule 231, we resolved that, right? This morning we talked about Rule 231. Did I give you some cool information on 231 might help you? I know I did. You don't need to nod your head. I'm okay with that. I have an ego bigger than this place sometimes. I'm going to give you another one. 570. Rule 570. Did you look it up since we've been in court?
I'm sorry, I've not.
You don't have to. 570, Criminal Rule of Civil Procedure. It says on motion, it's almost identical, or the court's motion, any person, pro se defendant can do it, petition the court to have a conference with the judge in a matter that might aid in the disposition of this case. Now, do you believe, hearing what you've heard from these fine gentlemen on the non-jail time opportunities, that's not going to work anyway, do you believe that this at least makes enough sense that somebody should listen to it? So I basically file a motion for a 570 conference. And I walk in, and I sit down, and the first thing that's already I'm an advantage, I'm inside the judge's chambers with the DA. Now, the whole thing in plea bargaining, and you know it, sir, if you're a seasoned veteran, and I know you are, what's the big deal with plea bargaining? It's in your face, right? Here, I'm going to give you the due process ladder. Number one, you are accused of something you did wrong. Generally speaking, you get certified mail. That's an information, okay? Not like that famous, what was that case of that politician? They sent 50 agents that knocked down his door. He was a political, somebody who had in for him politically. Just recently, he was a political, what was his name?
Stone.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I'm not his fan or anything, but that's over the top, right? That's a little bit crazy, where you slam somebody up against the thing and Mirandize them, and they have people with crosshairs and tear gas and stuff.
Same thing.
Yeah, ridiculous. The first thing you do, you have somebody comes in your office and he fears. You know the first thing he fears? He fears that. And I immediately send a letter to the policeman saying, I have been retained to represent this person. I will surrender him on a 24/7 basis. Please contact me. Don't go knock his door down and make him look like an idiot in front of his neighbors and whatnot. Again, can I remember we have an agreement that I'm allowed to take a turn signal, right? When I want to share something that it's going to make it easier for me. I'm assistant principal in a high school, right? Anybody ever hear of Conrad Palumbo? He was a basketball coach, a very strict guy. When he got mad, his finger grew. He was amazing. He was an intimidating guy. So I'm his assistant principal at age 29. He says, Angelo, I'll tell you right now. He had this big booming voice. I'll tell you right now. There's one thing I demand. I want you at Cedar Point before those kids get there. It's class day. He says, I want Buford Pusser to be standing on that cement with his arms crossed when they walk past so that $1 million playground doesn't get hurt by these lunatics. Some of these seniors are nuts. So the whole deal was, I gave me one thing to do, make sure I got there first. Of course, like the other day, I had a home alone moment, didn't wake up. The buses are taking off. I'm in a car going 80 and 90, passing buses on the Ohio Turnpike, looking for the school district name. I guess it was class day for lots of school districts. They do them a lot of times in one giant mass. Oh, God, it's so... Finally, I never did catch them. All at once, this police car is behind me. In Ohio, they have these little blue things. Man, they're so bright, and they're in the grills. They're under the tires. I never saw so many flashing things. And this guy had so many whip antennas out of that car. It looked like some kind of a sea crab or something. And he jumped out of that car, and he had those little silver acorns they have on their back. Listen, I memorized every bit of this. And he got this giant brim cap. He was gigantic. He kept unfolding. I was going so fast, he put me against the car and patted me down. You know how this ends. The school bus goes past. I swear this is a true story. I'm not embellishing. And the kids are yelling, Buford, Buford, yelling out the window. The symbol of law and order in the school district is being patted down by a gigantic state trooper. Got a hell of a fine for it, too, by the way. And in Ohio, they'll take your car. I had to beg him. I said, sir, you don't understand. That gigantic demon drop was the new ride then. I said, they're going to break the demon drop or something. You got to let me protect your state's prized park up in Sandusky, Ohio. You can't take my car. I got to get there. So.
Well, you pay with a credit card right there. Or did they do that?
That's way back when. Okay. That's in the 80s. Okay. So, no. Oh, they'll take anything.
They used to let you pay right there.
They're bad. They're still bad in Ohio. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so where were we? Okay, Rule 570, right? Okay, so Rule 570. Now, the most powerful document in this whole strategy is the continuance. Okay? The continuance is basically now, if in Allegheny County, you guys now, I'm telling you, I've been doing it years ago. I've been successful. There are lots of magistrates who, if you give them a decent treatment argument at the magistrate, they'll postpone the preliminary hearing and maybe not call it again for 6 months, and you show them the guy hasn't done it and it never goes downtown. Am I right?
Yeah, I think so.
A lot of them do it. They'll always do it. Now, the key is to give them a real treatment option, though. Know what you're talking about. Something that really, so we don't, hey, how cool would that be to say that, oh yeah, I'm doing this Vivitrol thing. You don't even know what Vivitrol is, but you're going to do it anyway because it's cool. And the judge is going to respond to it, and that guy kills himself or somebody else. How proud are you going to be of yourself? So we never want to enable somebody to hurt somebody. So we take seriously the treatment commitment. And we make sure they sign all of that stuff, and we make sure the doctor signs off that the person got the injection. Because I know until they get that injection, no matter what they say, they're not in control. And it's going to take months for that. So we have the continuance, but let's go back to the pressure they put on you in criminal law. In criminal law, the first thing you have is the arraignment. Okay? Tonight, no, this is Sunday. I missed the whole weekend. If I was out with my wife for dinner last night, sometime along the conversation, my words would not be coming back to me anymore. And I would realize that I did something. I don't know what I did, but I must have done something. And I wasn't arraigned. I wasn't told what I did. I didn't have a pretrial motion. I didn't have a sufficiency hearing. I didn't have a trial. I was found guilty and punished. It's all right there. So it's my way of explaining to you what an arraignment is. An arraignment tells you what you're accused of. And men many times never know what that is when you're married. Okay? Sorry, I'm not going to sound sexist. So it's just all at once, bam, bang. Let's say, so that's arraignment. The arraignment is your first opportunity. I know a lot of you defense attorneys basically say, I don't go to arraignment. Come and see me when you're ready for the preliminary hearing. But the arraignment is a good time to stop because all studies show that earliest intervention in a drug situation is always more effective. So you want to involve your client in these people at arraignment if you can. Because guess what? Then you can make the treatment a condition of what? Thank you. Bond condition. They're going to give you R&R basically on every case. But you can actually ask the judge, even though it's against your client's normal interest, you got that ethical thing, right? And we're saying you're going to go in treatment as a condition of your bond. And I'm telling you right now, you want to play around with me? I'm going to call them and put you back in jail to save you from killing yourself if you don't do this, and you go straight here. So it's a condition of bond. So now the treatment is in plan. Now, if you really want to do something very cool for your client, go back to the judge again, the magistrate or whoever, with a guy who's 6 months sober, and he tells the judge. He usually has more weight. He usually talks better, and it's amazing. I'm telling you right now, I have goosebumps on my body. My paralegal can tell you over 100 some people, right? We know we saved their life. And we know we saved the quality of their life. And we got paid fairly, remember our earlier class, the task list on there. What an amazing opportunity you have to do this, but you've got to take a step outside the box to do that, and you've got to go over to these professionals and shake their hands and say, let's do something special together. Lots of people are doing things in your office and my office that ain't working. Let's do something special. And let's save somebody's life. We keep on trying, and we still don't have the girls doing it yet, but I'm trying to get them to take iPhone photographs of every client so that person's face is somehow in our file so that we know that that's a human being behind that face. And we go above and beyond. So it's like a special form of practice. And remember, your title to your course here was community. I don't even remember. What's the title? They change it sometimes. Community leadership. We talked about that earlier. What's the rest of the title?
Professional collaboration.
Okay, and rest. Is there more?
Most successful and highest ethical career.
Is this a higher standard of ethical pursuit? It is. Again, I don't need nods. I know it is. It's so special, and it's so easy because nobody is doing it. Take the time to incorporate as many resources as you can. These doctors, they're wonderful. I love working with doctors, and guess what? They kind of like leaving behind that 40 a day deal and start doing something where they can really impact somebody's life, So again, the arraignment is an opportunity. At the sufficiency hearing, you have a bond issue come up again, okay? And then, of course, formal arraignment. And I do want to keep on going back to the Sixth Amendment, though. Very important for you to know. Some of you are criminal lawyers. By the way, did I answer your question? I know. Did I cover it yet? You had a question.
Yeah, I think it was closer to the arraignment thing, when you're going to start putting the program in place.
Oh, absolutely. Even pre-arraignment. Now, again, many times people don't even know they're arrested until they're arraigned, so you don't get them. But if you get a chance, get to the arraignment. Or even you can go back to the magistrate and add it to the bond conditions. But certainly at the preliminary hearing. So, anyway, and now at the preliminary hearing, remember now, the preliminary hearing has come and gone. 3 months usually, counselor, is that what it takes in your experience before it ever comes back up again? That's an eternity for an addict. He's going to be so far, he won't even remember your name anymore. That's an eternity. So you've got to be prepared to get him back in your office, maybe even get him into a program before you get to the preliminary hearing, or postpone the preliminary hearing so he's required to show up, and if not, they'll go get him. Right? So I don't think that you should get a commitment to go into treatment and go past the preliminary hearing, because you've got 3 months of nothingness to have. This is such a wonderful business. Let's think about it in terms of crude business. Right now? Because I'm almost done.
Yeah, you could dump any time. It's up to you. You can keep rolling.
No, I'm going to keep going. Yeah, I don't want to stop them and use up their time. The criminal, what was I talking about? I forgot.
Crude business.
Oh, crude business. How would you like to be in a business that I already showed you how you could get paid, and you're going to do it better than anybody else, and you're going to save the person's freedom and their life, okay, most often. Remember the bell curve. Let's aim at the middle, where all these people are. 40 million Americans. There's 40 million customers out there, and there are people riding around with police cars and badges picking them up for you.